Welcome to Find Your Teaching Tango, teacher-led moves and student-driven grooves. My name is Matt Daniel, and I am an NCBOLD ambassador. To follow along with this presentation, you can either scan the QR code or enter the bit.ly link at the top of your screen. Like I said, my name is Matt. I am, or was, a fifth grade teacher at Sug Bundy Elementary School in Farmville, North Carolina from 2017 to 2024. Farmville is a very small town in western Pitt County. It's about 20 minutes away from Greenville. I will be starting a new role this year as an assistant principal at our school. I'm also a triplet. I'm one of three. This is Megan here in the middle and Maddie on the far left. I got my bachelor's degree in elementary education from ECU, and I'm currently working on my master's degree in school administration with a graduation date set to be this upcoming spring. This is my third year as an NCBOLD ambassador, and I was the Pitt County Schools Teacher of the Year for the 2022-2023 school year. Here are a couple of different alignments with this session to the new digital learning competencies. In terms of our intended participant outcomes, my overall goals are for you to gain 3 to 5 new instructional strategies and activities revolved around small group instruction that can be used to specifically target increased student engagement, student participation, and academic rigor. For those of you that would like to take notes, I've got both print and digital options for note catchers. So as kind of alluded to earlier, this session is all about small group instruction. I'm not anti-whole group instruction by any means. However, I came to the decision to make this an NCBOLD session as over the last 2 years, small group instruction has really transformed my classroom and really helped transform some of my students' outcomes. So a little activity to get you warmed up. This is called synectics. It can look a lot of different ways, but this is how it's going to look for the sake of this presentation. There's a bunch of images on the next slide, and you're going to use the following sentence frame to connect this sentence frame to one of those images. All right? So it says small group instruction is like this image because. So if you would like, go ahead and pause the video, take about 30 seconds. Try and make as many connections to small group instruction and one or more of these images as you possibly can. Again, your prompt, small group instruction is like one of these images because. While on the road with NCBOLD, I had a lot of people make some really great connections to a few of these images. I had one person say small group instruction is like the puzzle. They talked about how our different students are like puzzle pieces. They bring different points of view, different understandings. We have to kind of work together to kind of create something complete at the end. I've also had people say that small group instruction is like a compass. It kind of helps the teacher in terms of pointing you in the right direction of where you need to go with your instruction. I've had teachers say small group instruction is like a key that unlocks doors to maybe misconceptions or misunderstandings that wouldn't have been discovered in whole group instruction. And last but not least, one of my favorites, I had a teacher say, small group instruction is like Starbucks coffee. It's personalized. Your name is on the cup. You can customize what you want in your drink. And to her, she said she felt like small group instruction allowed us to provide more of a custom or tailored learning experience. So again, this is called synectics. It's an instructional strategy that uses metaphor and analogy to stimulate diverse and creative thinking, to deepen the understanding of concepts. If you want to learn more about synectics and how you can use this strategy in your own classroom, feel free to click the link below. So I talked a little bit earlier about how I kind of came to the understanding that I wanted to do this session for NCBOLD. And it was in some reflecting in some of my earlier years of teaching. In terms of, what is the easiest teaching trap to fall into? I'll never forget, it was like my second year of teaching. I just had an observation, and my assistant principal at the time provided me with some really good feedback. She said, she really enjoyed everything she saw. She said my pacing was good, just the usual compliments. But she kind of left me with a really thoughtful statement to kind of close our conversation. She said, one thing that I want you to make sure, though, is that you're not working harder than the kids. And I thought, wow, no one had ever really said that to me before. But it was very true. Lots of times, as teachers, it is easy for us to kind of carry the load when it comes to teaching. Uh, this could be like the cognitive load. This could be kind of over planning a bit and not really giving our students time to explore concepts on their own. And it's important that we don't do this, because if we as teachers find ourselves consistently working harder than the students, they're definitely not learning anything. And furthermore, that kind of whole group instructional model, if we're just standing at the front of the room and we're talking and talking and talking and talking, and students are passively listening or maybe not even listening at all, the less they are thinking, therefore, the less they are learning. So, how do I kind of avoid this trap? The ideal instructional block in my eyes looks like this. So, even if it is a brand new concept, I do my absolute best to trim the whole group portion of my lesson uh, and keep it to about 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes maximum. When I trim the whole group, I've found that I've been able to use that remaining time to expand opportunities for my students to explore and interact with content, either in a small group with me, in small groups with one another, or by completing and engaging in easily monitored tasks individually. I think the best thing about small group instruction is that when our small group instruction operates at full capacity, actually all three of these things can happen at the very same time, and every single student is getting exactly what they need. So, as I said, I taught fifth grade for 7 or 8 years, and it really, small group instruction, I didn't really adopt it too much until the final 2 years that I was in the classroom. And like I said, it worked wonders. So, why did it work in my fifth grade classroom? The first thing it did is it bridged the gap of short attention spans. I've noted, particularly after COVID, the amount of time our students can sit and actively engage in an activity, typically like a whole group activity led by the teacher. That time gets smaller and smaller and smaller every year. And, we can really unpack, why is that? That's really kind of a whole different session. But small group instruction allows me to help bridge the gap of their short attention. It also allows me to integrate content. As an elementary teacher, there's been a few years where I've been responsible for teaching all 4 subjects. And I don't care how you slice and dice the day. As a fifth grade teacher preparing for 3 end of grade tests, there's really no guaranteed way to make sure that each subject gets its standalone required time. However, with small group instruction, I've been able to integrate content a lot easier. For example, maybe at the small group table, I'm working on a math concept, but while my students are waiting at their seat to be pulled to my small group table, they're working on a science question set. Differentiated instruction becomes core instruction with small groups. I know a lot of people say that small group instruction is really only for intervention, and I don't think that's the case. I can differentiate my instruction in a small group setting in a way that would probably really interrupt the flow of whole group instruction, as I'm maybe only helping 1 or 2 students try and figure something out while the rest of the class is sitting and doing nothing. However, when I've got a group of 5 students at my small group table, I can really work to meet the needs of everyone there without interrupting someone else's instruction. Students can illustrate mastery through a variety of different tasks, some that I'll talk about in the presentation. Movement also helps keep our students engaged, particularly in a station rotation model. I just find that the movement helps the time pass, and the students are more engaged in their assignments. And last but not least, the most important thing, in my opinion, your mimickers and your pretenders cannot hide. We've all done it with whole group instruction, where maybe we close the portion of a lesson by saying, what questions might you have? Or does everyone understand? And typically no one says anything, right? Our students are very talented at pretending to pay attention and pretending to understand what's going on in the classroom. However, when I have a small group of 4 or 5 students in front of me, no one really can hide. I can look directly at their paper, I can look in their face, and I can really see who understands what we're doing and who maybe needs a little bit more extra support. So, small group instruction can look a variety of ways. The first way that I would always start my small group instruction in my classroom was something that I call the to-do list. A lot of people that want to start small group instruction make a mistake of immediately jumping into a station rotation. That's a lot of moving parts and pieces, and our students aren't always going to be successful if that's where we start. So this is more of kind of a launching point for eventually moving to a station rotation. So what is the to-do list? Well, the to-do list is pretty much students meeting with the teacher at least once in some sort of rotation. And students who are not meeting with the teacher have a to-do list while they wait their turn. So for example, if we look up here, this was something that I call must do or may do. So obviously, when I call their table, they're going to bring their graph paper and a pencil and they're going to do an activity with me. However, while they wait, there are two things that they must do before they can make a choice from the things that they may do. So the must do was to complete the first 10 questions on their test and then to pass 2 iReady math lessons. So again, this is all happening simultaneously. Some kids are meeting with me at the table, some kids are working on the must do activities, and some kids who are already finished with the must do activities have picked one of these options to work on. The same thing happened in my social studies classroom. So do first and choose one. So their do first was a Roanoke Colony reading passage and sentence frame. And then once that was done, they could choose one of these topics. And maybe at my small group table, we were talking about a video that I had them watch the day before and a few of those talking points that I had them look out for. You can also use a menu to kind of transform your to-do list. As you can see, this is an example. I gave kids what I called a math menu when I taught math. Their must-do assignments were here at the top. And as you can see, I've got check boxes so they can kind of keep track of what it is that they're doing. And then you have their may-do list. As you can see, there's different numbers of boxes next to each of these activities. Not only do checkboxes allow for the student or the teacher to keep up with what's been completed, but it also shows students how often they can make certain selections. So while the task card board game is really fun, I only want them doing that once. Why? Because maybe it's the beginning of the year and I see a lot more value in them getting a lot of reps with their multiplication facts. So again, you can click on this image in the presentation link and you can customize this menu to fit your needs. As mentioned earlier, the kind of goal for small group instruction is to eventually work towards our ideal station rotation model. Now, in 2024, our class sizes are a little bit too big to only have 3 rotations. So rather than using this graphic as kind of a springboard for how many stations you should instead use this to uncover the kinds of stations that you should probably have in your classroom. Typically for a station rotation, I always have one teacher-led station, one station with technology, and per usual, if I have one station with technology, I need one non-tech station to kind of balance that out. So the teacher-led station, obviously that could be something that the teacher and students complete together at the teacher table. I wouldn't take the words teacher-led too seriously. In fact, maybe it's kind of a teacher-monitored station. Maybe you want the students kind of carrying the cognitive load, but you're just kind of there as a gatekeeper or as someone who can provide support if needed. For technology, I think technology is a great thing. However, one thing I've noticed in my years of teaching is the longer we have kids doing something with technology, the more likely that they're going to become disengaged. They're going to submit maybe a final product that isn't up to par. Or they're going to be doing something that they shouldn't be doing. So that's why I always say, if you have something tech related, make sure you have something non-tech related to kind of balance that out. So how does this station rotation look like in my classroom? Let's first talk about groupings, okay? Students are grouped by the teacher. You could do random groupings, or you could do some ability groupings. So kind of the random or heterogeneous groupings is kind of like a mixed bag of students of varying abilities, or maybe there's some sort of baseline that you want to use to group kids of similar abilities. This could be an assessment of some sort, like a test or a quiz. It could be maybe an informal assessment. Maybe you gave them an exit ticket the day before, and sorting through the exit tickets, you kind of formed groups of who's demonstrated mastery, who's near mastery, and who kind of really doesn't know what they're doing yet. So again, all sorts of options here. For this particular example, I've grouped students heterogeneously. Students rotate through various stations. A lot of times I hear, Matt, I think station rotations are great, but I just don't have time for them to visit all those stations in one day. Well, guys, who said they had to visit all the stations in one day? Students may visit all the stations during one class period, or maybe you can have them visit different stations throughout the week. So, for example, let's say I taught maybe more of a whole group style lesson the first half of class, and in the second half of class, I wanted to do some station rotations, and we were able to get through two rotations. So, what do we do tomorrow? Well, we just do the other two rotations that we didn't get to the day before. This is also known as centers, but like I said, station rotation centers, you can really call it any way that you want. Let's talk about something maybe more specific in terms of my classroom. How did math small groups look in my room? The first thing that I typically did, I didn't always do this, but the majority of the time, I loved heterogeneous groupings. I liked having a mixed bag of students in a group. Um, this allowed me to really make sure that everybody's needs were met. So, for example, let's say I had a group of 4 students in front of me, and we did some problem solving together. And then I said, all right, I want you to sit right here and solve these two problems. Let's say the first 2 students were really good and were able to solve those two problems independently. And let's say that the other 2 students were still struggling. I could look at the 2 students who were demonstrating mastery and I could say, oh, awesome job. I want you to finish the rest of this worksheet at your seat by yourself. And then I could keep the other 2 students that were struggling with me at the table. That way, both groups of students got exactly what they needed. As you can see, the station names are along the bottom. So I've got station 1 was meet with the teacher, station 2 tic-tac-toe, so on and so forth. I also put captions at the bottom here to provide directions or maybe list the materials that students needed. So for example, when they came to me, all they needed to bring was a pencil, whereas when they went to the tic-tac-toe station, they needed these items. The goal of this slide was to include as many directions as possible in a format that was easy to read so that students didn't interrupt my instruction asking questions that they should, let's face it, already know the answers to. It also had some directions for early finishers. So pick a may do activity. I usually had an anchor chart of some sort hanging up in the classroom with options for the month of what kids could do if they finished an assignment early. Last but not least, I also had a timer here to keep me on track. If you like how this slide looks, I've got a blank template at the end of this presentation, and again, you can customize it to meet your needs. Here's an example of what a station rotation might have looked like. Well, not might, it's definitely what it looked like in my science class. Some examples that I got off the internet for math and reading, and example of when I taught social studies of what my station rotations looked like as well. So the next portion of this activity in person was we actually broke apart into a station rotation. Obviously, station rotation is going to kind of be hard to do in a virtual setting. So instead, I'll kind of go through these different resources with you together and allow you to kind of explore a little bit on your own. So the first station was all about exploring resources in a Wakelet, about setting expectations and staying organized. And when you click here to view this Wakelet, I'm not going to click it, but when you click here, you'll see a variety of articles, videos, infographics, all sorts of things where you can view some resources on what it may look like to set expectations and stay organized in a variety of grade levels or content areas. Station number 2 was all about student learning activities. These are not activities that would take place at my small group table. These were actually activities that kids would do while they were waiting to come see me or work with me at the small group table. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is scavenger hunt. You could do this with a variety of content areas. I would have questions and answers formatted like this. Taped all around my classroom because obviously what's a scavenger hunt if they're not walking around, right? So let's say number 4 right here says how many more hot dogs were sold on Wednesday than on Friday. One thing that I need to make clear, the answer here at the bottom of every question is never the answer to this particular question. If I just posted the answer right under it, what's the point of solving it, right? What would happen is the students would view the question. They could work with a partner, maybe independently, and solve or discover the answer to that question. And then their job was to look around the room and see which paper had the correct answer listed at the bottom. Let's say on Wednesday, 8 hot dogs were sold, and Friday, um, 6 hot dogs were sold. How many more hot dogs were sold on Wednesday than Friday? Well, 2 more were sold on Wednesday. The answer is 2. Oh, they found the 2. Therefore, they would do this particular question next. So again, it's kind of a great way to break up the monotony of, just giving them a question set. By also having them out of their seat, it is easier for me sitting at the small group table to kind of monitor their engagement from a distance. If they're sitting at their seat for a 10-minute rotation and their pencil's working on a paper, I don't know if they are writing the answers to the question. I don't know, maybe if they're writing their friend a note or if they're doodling. I can't really keep track. However, when they're up and moving, I can really monitor their engagement and their progress and maybe even their understanding. If I know the order in which they should be going, I should be able to kind of tell from a distance whether they've understood that concept or not. And again, I would provide them with some sort of artifact sheet to show their work and record their answers, and that would turn into a very nice ticket out the door. The next example is tic-tac-toe. I don't play tic-tac-toe like the traditional game where kids are competing against each other. Typically in the classroom, I avoid games with turns and outs, and here's why. The first reason I avoid games with turns is, well, if it's not a student's turn, what are they doing? And I don't think that's necessarily a rhetorical question. I think it really depends on the activity. If a student is waiting for their turn, are they even paying attention, right? And also, if a student has to wait for their turn to engage in a learning activity, I just think that's a bad teaching practice, and we should avoid that at all costs. We should have our students trying to work and engage with some sort of learning material, every minute of every class period. The next thing that I do is I avoid games with outs. If, again, you don't get to engage with learning material because you got out, that's just not a good teaching practice. We want our students to be engaging with the material. Not to mention, if our students definitely don't want to do the learning, they're probably going to work to get out on purpose. So back to tic-tac-toe. This could take place a variety of different ways. Believe it or not, the way that tic-tac-toe works in my classroom, students could actually do this by themselves. An example of them doing this by themselves would be them choosing, okay, how do I want to make tic-tac-toe across this board? Maybe I want to go diagonally here. So what they would do is they would read each of these definitions. These are geometry vocabulary terms, and they would write the answers on a blank tic-tac-toe grid. Again, this could turn into a great ticket out the door. I could check their work and see how they did before the next class period. Let's say I've got a group of students. Maybe they wanted to break off into partners. One partner could say, hey, I'm going to make tic-tac-toe this way. How would you like to make tic-tac-toe? And their partner could say, okay, well, if you're going to make tic-tac-toe this way, I'll make tic-tac-toe this way. And maybe they can even swap their papers at the end and check their work. Or if it's something really complicated and you want the students to kind of work together and support one another, they can both work to make tic-tac-toe the same way. All sorts of options here for this tic-tac-toe board. One of those options being maybe you leave this board up throughout the week. Obviously, I would put up more than one board at a time. The reason I would put up more than one board at a time is you don't want a large group of students congregating over the same board. That kind of defeats the purpose and may delay, some solid work habits. So maybe you could have all sorts of boards posted around the room, maybe all on the same topic or maybe different topics. Really just depends on what it is that you want to do. Last but not least, these are all very common digital assessment tools. I'm going to be honest, I'm more of a fan of quizzes and Blooket. I feel like those are the only two of the three options where it's still more so about the questions than the game. With Gimkit, I think it's really kind of easy for the kids to worry more about the game than it is answer the questions. Just my opinion. There's also lots of features on Gimkit now that you have to pay for, whereas quizzes and Blooket are pretty much free for the most part. Most people have already used these, so I won't really talk about them very much. In terms of some bonus student learning activities, what else can students do while they're waiting to be called by your table? Everybody loves, a good set of task cards. choice boards, SchoolNet question sets, silent reading. Yes, that's a thing. Sometimes we can just sit and read, and that's good for us. You can click this image to learn more about playlists. Again, all sorts of different options here of things that students can do while they're waiting or to be pulled by the teacher during small group instruction. The last station is about progress monitoring and accountability. This is where I had a gallery walk of all sorts of resources in terms of planning templates, data tracking, and student accountability. If you would like to see what these templates look like, feel free to click these images. It'll force a copy. One thing that I found that really helps motivate my students give their best effort during station rotations is to display some of their data. Um, in terms of data tracking and academics, I had a different example in person, but this is essentially kind of the same thing where each time we did station rotations, I typically had my students complete some sort of SchoolNet assessment on a topic that we were learning. When I taught 3 classes throughout the day, I would write each class's average on the anchor chart. So maybe let's say instead of this saying sales quiz, maybe it just said sales, and I would have block 1 score, block 2 score, block 3 score. Well, when block 2 got into class, they were looking for block 1 score. When block 3 came to class, they were looking at block 2 score. And when block 1 returned to class the next day, they were going to see, hey, how did our score hold up against all the others? So again, just a very simple way that engage students to really give their best effort on an independent assignment. One element of data tracking that I don't think we talk about enough, though, is how we can track our habits and our behavior. Um, Lots of times when we talk about data tracking, our first go-to is academics. And while I don't think that's a terrible thing, I think we can be even more powerful when we track these things. Uh, these were maybe some expectations and procedures that I just kind of wanted to refresh when we came back from our winter break. And I gave my students in each class an opportunity to earn stickers for each of these categories. My expectation was just because you earned a sticker didn't mean that you kept it. You had to prove that, just because you entered the classroom correctly on Tuesday didn't mean that you didn't really have to worry about it anymore and you could come in however you wanted for the rest of the week. Each block earned a sticker as they met their expectations. And I said either the class with the most stickers by January 19th or the first class to get all of their stickers would win a popsicle party. And as you can see, Block C won that. I also had some best assessment practices here. So things that I wanted my students to do when they were completing items by themselves. Ownership of learning goals, just some specific things that I wanted students to do to prove that they took ownership of their learning and held themselves accountable. And we would oftentimes have some class reflections where we would unpack some of these questions. In terms of student accountability, I'm a big believer in artifact sheets. For maybe some math independent activities that they were doing during stations, I would have them always write their answers and their work on notebook paper, and they would organize their work into different boxes for each question. This ensured that students did more than just kind of clicked. It was easy to check over their work and understand misconceptions this way. And lots of times the next day's assignment was for them to make corrections, and it was very easy for them to just pop a sticky note over the previous day's work and make their corrections that way. For science or for reading, we use more of a 3-column note style where they would write, question number 1, the answer is C. Well, I think the answer is C because the sun is the overall powering force behind the water cycle, right? So when they had to tell me why it was the answer, it really allowed them to think a lot more before just clicking. Obviously, I had to model this several times before having students do this on their own. But by the time I had modeled it several times and given them the chance to kind of do it and provide some feedback when it wasn't a grade, by the time that it was a grade, students were really doing things as they should. Some additional resources that I have for you include some sample schedules for maybe different schedule of a block that you teach during the school day. I've also got the slideshow template. So if you liked any of these, you can click on them and make them your own. I also have some sample timers in here and some directions on how you can insert your own timers on a Google slideshow. And these are just some references and resources that I've used to help build my session or my different sessions rather over the years. If you have any questions about anything that you saw today, feel free to contact me at any time, and we value your feedback. Um, like I said, I really hope this was very helpful to you and that you are able to incorporate some of these strategies to help make small group instruction really meaningful in your classroom.